Deathworlder Mercenary, caught between alien crime queens and galactic chaos, reaches its explosive climax as Felix infiltrates Arcturus Vane's diplomatic vessel, downloading crucial evidence of corruption while the criminal queens launch their coordinated diversion. When confronted by Vane himself, Felix's desperate battle aboard the shuddering ship culminates in victory as the Syndicate hackers simultaneously dismantle Vane's entire operation, exposing his treachery to the galaxy. The recycled air in Nexus Prime hummed with tension. Felix leaned against the viewport, watching distant ships drift like metal fireflies through the endless void. The cold, fluorescent light cast harsh shadows across his weathered face, highlighting a network of scars that told stories of battles across a dozen worlds. His dark skin absorbed the artificial light, making his ice-blue eyes stand out all the more sharply. Nexus Prime Station served as neutral territory between the two largest criminal syndicates in this sector of the galaxy, the Shadowbane Syndicate and the Void Star Cartel. For decades, they had maintained an uneasy truce, dividing territories and trading routes with minimal bloodshed. But something had changed in the past 3 standard months. Shipments had been raided, operatives assassinated, and accusations flew between the organizations like plasma bolts. Felix had been hired as a mediator, a role that made him snort with bitter amusement. He was no diplomat, but he was human, a Deathworlder, born on a planet with gravity nearly twice galactic standard, with atmospheric toxins that would kill most species, and predators that haunted the nightmares of even the most battle-hardened aliens. Humans had a reputation for surviving what should kill them, for adapting to impossible situations, and for a particular brand of calculated violence that made them valuable mercenaries. The station's air recyclers coughed and sputtered, adding their mechanical chorus to the background hum. Felix checked his chronometer. His contact was late. Torvin, the broker who had arranged this meeting, had promised both sides would hear him out. Felix wasn't optimistic, but the pay was good, and the alternative was all-out war between syndicates that would inevitably drag innocents into the crossfire. Felix pushed himself away from the viewport, hand instinctively brushing the plasma pistol at his hip. The weapon was technically illegal on Nexus Prime, but security was more concerned with maintaining the appearance of order than enforcing actual laws. As long as weapons weren't discharged in public areas, they turned a blind eye. "You, human!" The voice came from behind, harsh and guttural. Felix turned slowly, facing 3 station security officers. Their uniforms were crisp, but their eyes held the dull gleam of corruption. The leader, a tall Krillic with chitinous mandibles, clicked his mouthparts together in a gesture of contempt. "Weapons are prohibited in common areas," the Krillic said, though his own hand rested on a neural disruptor. "I have a permit," Felix replied calmly, not reaching for his documentation. The Krillic laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Permits can be revoked, especially for primitives." The 2 officers flanking him, a bulky Tauran and a willowy sylph, tensed, ready for action. Felix sighed. He had hoped to avoid violence before the negotiations even began, but sometimes these shows of force were necessary to establish respect. "I am here on official business," he said, mediating between Shadowbane and Void Star. A human, mediating. The Krillic's mandibles flared in what passed for a smile among his kind. What could a Deathworlder possibly understand about galactic politics? You're just muscle. Hired thugs. Felix remained still, watching the trio spread out to surround him. This wasn't an official security check. This was intimidation, possibly a test from one of the syndicates to gauge his capabilities. "Last chance to walk away," Felix warned. The Krillic reached for his disruptor. "Last chance for you to kneel. Felix moved. To the untrained eye, it would have appeared as though Felix simply vanished from where he stood and reappeared behind the Krillic. But it was merely the natural speed of a human body honed by years of combat in high-gravity environments. His elbow connected with the base of the Kryllic's skull, right where the neural cluster controlled motor functions. The Tauran bellowed, charging with lowered horns. Felix sidestepped, using the alien's momentum to send him crashing into a nearby waste disposal unit. The sylph was faster, more graceful, drawing a vibroblade from her sleeve. The weapon hummed as she slashed at Felix's throat. Felix caught her wrist, careful not to snap the delicate bones. With his other hand, he pressed a nerve cluster at the base of her neck. The sylph collapsed, unconscious before she hit the floor. The Tauran staggered to his feet, shaking his massive head. Felix delivered a precise kick to the alien's knee joint, where the exoskeleton was thinnest. The crack echoed through the corridor, followed by the Tauran's howl of pain. 30 seconds from start to finish. Felix stood among the 3 incapacitated security officers, not even breathing hard. "Impressive," came a new voice, smooth and cultured. "I expected you'd have to demonstrate your skills eventually, but I didn't think it would be before our first meeting." A figure emerged from the shadows of a nearby maintenance corridor. Toro, the representative of Shadowbane Syndicate, was a Signon, tall, with iridescent scales that shifted from crimson to deep violet depending on the light. His 3 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of interest among his species. "They were corrupt," Felix said with a shrug. "Testing me, or trying to shake me down." "Both, likely," Toro replied, stepping carefully around the unconscious Kryllic. "Nexus security has been compromised lately. One more symptom of the deteriorating situation." He gestured down the corridor. "Matriarch Kyrian awaits. She's eager to meet the human who comes so highly recommended." Felix fell into step beside the Signon. "And Void Star? Will they be represented?" Toro's scales rippled with unease. "Matriarch Valeth has agreed to separate meetings first. Joint negotiations will follow. Assuming you can convince both sides, you're worth listening to." He glanced at the downed security officers. "Though this display may have already done that." Felix nodded. The politics of criminal organizations were complex, built on reputation and shows of strength as much as actual power. Violence was a language everyone in these circles understood. They walked in silence through increasingly opulent corridors. The public areas of Nexus Prime were utilitarian, but the deeper sections, leased to wealthy corporations and influential individuals, displayed ostentatious wealth. Holographic art pieces shifted and flowed along the walls. Precious metals inlaid the floor panels, and gravity was adjusted to the exact comfort level of each species. Toro paused before an unmarked door. "A word of advice. Human. Matriarch Kyrian lost her second-in-command in what we believe was a Void Star assassination. This is personal for her now. Tread carefully." The door slid open silently, revealing a chamber bathed in red light. The temperature was noticeably higher than the corridor. Signon's preferred heat. In the center of the room, reclining on a levitating dais, was Kyrian. The matriarch of Shadowbane Syndicate was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with scales that blazed like living fire. Unlike Toro's more humanoid appearance, Kyrian retained the ancestral Signon form, serpentine lower body, powerful torso, and a crest of crystalline spines that currently stood erect, a sign of agitation or interest. "So this is the human mediator," she said, her voice surprisingly melodic. "The famous Felix." Felix bowed slightly, a gesture of respect without submission. "Matriarch Kyrian, thank you for agreeing to meet." "I agreed because alternatives are unpleasant," she replied, gesturing for him to approach. "War with Void Star would be costly, profitable, eventually, but costly." "Then we share an objective," Felix said, maintaining eye contact with the massive alien. "I want to prevent unnecessary bloodshed." Kyrian's crystalline crest shimmered. "Noble, but naive. Bloodshed is rarely unnecessary in our business. It's simply a question of calculating acceptable losses. She leaned forward, her massive head lowering to Felix's level. Do you know what sparked this conflict? Human? I've heard reports. A neutral shipment of quantum processors, hijacked in Shadowbane territory. Void Star operatives implicated. 3 Shadowbane lieutenants killed, including your second-in-command. My sister's child, Kyrian hissed, heat literally radiating from her scales. Killed not for business, but to send a message. Valeth crossed a line. Felix kept his expression neutral. I'll need to hear Valeth's side before forming conclusions. Of course, Kyrian said with a dismissive wave of her clawed hand. You'll find her version quite different. I'm sure. Void Star specializes in deception and misdirection. We prefer direct action. Which is why I'm here, Felix said. A neutral party with no stake in your conflict. Kyrian's laughter was like crackling flames. Neutral. No one is neutral. Felix of Earth. Everyone has a price, a pressure point, a vulnerability. Her 3 eyes narrowed. Even Deathworlders. I'm not for sale, Felix said quietly. And I'm not easily intimidated. We shall see, Kyrian gestured, and a holographic display materialized between them. These are the shipping manifests, security feeds, and forensic data from the attack. Examine them. Then meet with Valeth. When you've confirmed her treachery, return here to discuss terms of surrender or annihilation. Felix accepted the data crystal Toro handed him. I'll review everything carefully, but I make no promises about my conclusions. Kyrian's crest flattened slightly. A concession. Fair enough, human. But remember, while Void Star deals in shadows and whispers, we deal in fire and blood. Cross us, and you'll burn just like anyone else. The meeting with Matriarch Valeth couldn't have been more different, where Kyrian's chamber was hot and bathed in red light. Valeth's private suite on Nexus Prime was cool, illuminated by soft blue bioluminescent panels. Where Kyrian was all fire and fury, Valeth embodied ice and calculation. The matriarch of Void Star Cartel was a Novarian, a species evolved on a tidally locked world of perpetual twilight. Her skin was pale blue, almost translucent, revealing a network of darker veins beneath. 6 pupilless eyes, arranged in a semicircle above a lipless mouth, gave her face an expression of permanent, serene observation. "Felix," she greeted him, her voice like water flowing over stones. "I've heard much about your reputation." "Hopefully not all bad," Felix replied, taking the seat she indicated. Valeth's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "Quite the contrary. Efficient, discreet, principled, for a mercenary. Qualities I admire." Unlike Kyrian's dramatic dais, Valeth sat behind a simple desk of what appeared to be actual wood, an extravagant rarity in space. The room was minimalist, every object placed with deliberate precision. "I understand you've already met with Kyrian," Valeth continued. "No doubt she painted us as treacherous assassins. She provided evidence suggesting Void Star operatives attacked a shipment and killed her relative," Felix said neutrally. Valeth's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. "Evidence manufactured with the same skill they manufacture illegal neural implants," she said. "Shadowbane has become desperate. Their supply chains are faltering, their territories shrinking. Rather than adapt, they lash out." She leaned forward slightly. "We did not attack that shipment. We did not kill Kyrian's kin." Felix kept his expression neutral. "Do you have counter-evidence?" Valeth nodded. A gesture of her 6-fingered hand brought up a holographic display, similar to the one Kyrian had shown. "Our operatives were conducting surveillance in the Hephaestus cluster when this alleged attack occurred. We have positioning data, communication logs, and energy signatures that prove it." Felix studied the data, comparing it mentally with what Kyrian had shared. Something wasn't adding up. Both sets of evidence seemed authentic, yet they told completely contradictory stories. "There's a third player," he said finally, looking up at Valeth. The Novarian's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. "You reached that conclusion quickly. Both sets of evidence are too perfect," Felix explained. "In real operations, there are always inconsistencies, small errors, unexpected variables. These records read like simulations." Valeth was silent for a long moment. "A concerning hypothesis," she finally said. "If true, it suggests someone is deliberately provoking conflict between our organizations. Someone with significant resources and technical expertise," Felix added, "and a motive to see you destroy each other. The list of entities who would benefit from our mutual destruction is substantial," Valeth admitted. "From rival syndicates to corporate conglomerates to the Galactic Peace Assembly itself." Felix raised an eyebrow. "The GPA, they're peacekeepers." Valeth's laugh was like ice cracking. "They maintain the peace that benefits established powers. Criminal organizations like ours operate in the margins, providing services and goods that the legitimate economy refuses to acknowledge. We are a necessary counterbalance to their regulated markets." Felix considered this. There was truth in her words. Organizations like Shadowbane and Void Star had evolved beyond simple criminal enterprises. They were alternative economic systems, with their own codes, hierarchies, and even forms of justice. "I need time to analyze both data sets," Felix said. "And I may need access to additional information." Valeth inclined her head. "You shall have what you need. I've arranged accommodations for you on Level 8, Section D, Neutral Territory. The suite is secure and equipped with advanced analytical tools." Felix stood. "Thank you. I'll report my findings as soon as possible." "One last thing. Felix." Valeth's voice had dropped to a near whisper. "If a third party is manipulating us, they will not appreciate your interference. Watch your back." The warning proved prophetic sooner than expected. Felix had barely settled into his assigned quarters when the first attempt on his life came. A maintenance drone, reprogrammed to emit a concentrated burst of radiation that would have liquefied his organs had he not noticed the subtle distortion in the air, a telltale sign of active radiation. Felix disabled the drone with an electromagnetic pulse grenade he kept for such occasions. The device would have left no trace of tampering, appearing as a simple malfunction that resulted in an unfortunate accident. Someone knew he was getting close to the truth. Felix spent the next 12 hours buried in data analysis. He transferred both Kyrian's and Valeth's evidence to a secure, isolated system of his own design, layer by layer. He peeled back the encryption, examining not just the content, but the metadata, the hidden information about when and how the files were created. Patterns emerged, subtle inconsistencies in timestamps, compression algorithms that didn't match the supposed source systems, and, most tellingly, identical quantum signature markers buried deep in both datasets. Impossible if they had been created by different organizations. Both matriarchs had been given false evidence, meticulously crafted to incriminate the other. The question was, by whom? Felix had just discovered a recurring authentication code when his quarter's security system chimed a warning. Someone was attempting to override his door locks. He grabbed his plasma pistol and took position behind a reinforced cabinet. The door slid open, and a hooded figure slipped inside, moving with the fluid grace of a trained operative. "Don't move," Felix said, pistol aimed at the intruder's center mass. The figure froze, then slowly raised empty hands. "I'm not here to kill you, human." A female voice, cool and precise. The hood fell back, revealing the pale blue features of a Novarian. Not Valeth, but the resemblance was striking. "I'm Lyra, Valeth's security chief," she said. "I need to move you immediately. Your location has been compromised." "How convenient," Felix replied. not lowering his weapon. "And how did you know that?" "Because we've been monitoring communications to and from Nexus Prime. There's a kill order on you, issued within the last hour, but not from us, and not from Shadowbane either." Felix considered his options. This could be a trap, but his instincts, honed through years of surviving situations where others perished, told him the threat was real. "Where are we going?" he asked, already gathering his essential equipment. "Matriarch Valeth has requested your presence at her secondary facility. She believes your discovery warrants immediate discussion." Felix nodded. "Lead the way, but understand, I'm not aligned with Void Star. I'm still a neutral party." Lyra's expression was unreadable. Neutrality may soon become a luxury none of us can afford. They moved through the maintenance tunnels of Nexus Prime, avoiding security checkpoints and surveillance zones. Lyra clearly knew the station intimately, navigating through sections that didn't appear on any public schematics. "How deep does Void Star's influence run here?" Felix asked, as they passed through a hidden access panel. "Deep enough," Lyra replied, "though not as deep as our adversaries. Apparently." They emerged in a private docking bay, where a sleek shuttle waited, engines already humming with barely contained power. As they approached the vessel, Felix's combat instincts flared. He grabbed Lyra and pulled her down, just as plasma fire seared the air where they had been standing. "Ambush!" Lyra hissed, drawing a needle-thin pistol from her sleeve. 4 figures in unmarked black armor converged on their position, firing with precision that spoke of military training. Felix returned fire, his plasma pistol cutting through the reinforced crates they were using as cover. "Get to the shuttle," he shouted to Lyra. "I'll hold them off." The Novarian hesitated only briefly before sprinting toward the vessel. Felix provided covering fire, his shots calculated to force the attackers into defensive positions rather than kill. He needed one alive for questioning. The shuttle's engines roared as Lyra reached the boarding ramp. Felix backed toward it, maintaining suppressive fire. One of the attackers broke cover, attempting to flank him. Felix adjusted his aim and fired, catching the figure in the leg. The attacker went down with a cry of pain that sounded distinctly. Signan. Shadowbane operatives? That didn't align with what he'd discovered. Unless... Felix had no time to complete the thought as the remaining attackers concentrated their fire on him. He dove for the shuttle ramp, rolling aboard as Lyra slammed the hatch controls. Plasma bolts impacted the hull as the shuttle lifted off, protective shields activating with a shimmering hum. "Unexpected complication," Lyra said, her calm voice belied by the rapid blinking of her eyes. Though perhaps not entirely surprising. "Those were Signans," Felix said, strapping himself into a seat as the shuttle accelerated sharply. "Shadowbane operatives." "So it would appear," Lyra agreed, inputting commands into the navigation system. "But appearances have proven deceptive lately, haven't they?" The shuttle broke away from Nexus Prime, accelerating to sublight speed. Through the viewport, Felix watched the massive station recede, its spinning rings and extending arms glittering with thousands of lights against the void. "Where are we actually going?" he asked. "Matriarch Valeth awaits at our secondary command center in the Kepler outpost," Lyra replied. "She has interesting news. Care to share it now?" Lyra's expression remained impassive. "It's not my place. But I will say this. Your theory about a third party manipulating events has gained significant support." The journey to Kepler Outpost took 3 hours, during which Felix reviewed his findings and prepared his report. The outpost itself was unremarkable from the outside, a small asteroid mining facility that had officially been abandoned decades ago. Inside, however, it housed one of Void Star's most secure command centers. Lyra led him through security checkpoints where guards with cold, assessing eyes examined him with both technological scanners and old-fashioned scrutiny. Finally, they entered a conference room where Valeth waited, along with an unexpected guest, Kyrian, Matriarch of Shadowbane. Her fiery scales dimmed to a smoldering crimson, sat across from her longtime rival. The tension between them was palpable, like two opposing magnetic fields straining against each other. "Our human mediator arrives," Kyrian said, her voice carefully controlled. "With impeccable timing." "I understand there was an attempt on his life," Valeth replied, "by operatives wearing Shadowbane armor." Kyrian's crest flared. "Stolen or replicated, clearly. Just as someone has been replicating Void Star operations to frame my people." Felix looked between the two powerful alien leaders. "You've both figured it out." "Enough to know we're being played against each other," Kyrian growled, "though the puppet master remains in shadow." "Not entirely," Valeth said, activating a holographic display in the center of the table. "This arrived 1 hour ago from one of our deep cover operatives in the Galactic Peace Assembly." The hologram showed a tall, elegant human man with silver hair and piercing green eyes. He wore the formal white and gold uniform of a GPA official, adorned with the insignia of a deputy secretary. "Arcturus Vane," Valeth explained. "Deputy Secretary for Rim Territories Pacification. Recently assigned to mediate disputes in our sector." "A peacekeeper," Felix said, studying the image. "With a vested interest in criminal organizations destroying each other." "More than that," Kyrian added. "Our intelligence suggests he's been building a private power base within the GPA. Military assets, black budget operations, specialized personnel, all officially directed at pacifying criminal elements. But actually aimed at replacing us with his own operation," Valeth finished. "Criminal enterprises ultimately controlled by Vane himself, using GPA resources and protection." Felix nodded slowly. The pieces were fitting together. "The false evidence, the manufactured conflict. It's all to weaken both your organizations enough that a third force can move in and take over." "Precisely," Valeth said. "And according to our intelligence, Vane is scheduled to arrive at Nexus Prime in 3 days for official peace talks between our organizations. Talks he expects to fail spectacularly," Kyrian added, her scales glowing brighter with anger, "giving him justification to deploy GPA peacekeeping forces throughout the sector." Felix looked between the two matriarchs. "So you've called a truce to deal with a common enemy." "A temporary alignment of interests," Valeth corrected, her 6 eyes blinking in sequence. "Once Vane is neutralized, our natural competition will resume." "But with honor," Kyrian insisted. "Not with the manufactured bloodshed this human puppeteer has orchestrated." Felix considered the situation. His original mission, to prevent war between the syndicates, had evolved into something far more complex. Now he was potentially siding with criminal organizations against a government official. But if the evidence was accurate, Vane wasn't just corrupt. He was manipulating events to cause maximum casualties for personal gain. The bloodshed would be extensive, reaching far beyond syndicate members to civilians caught in the crossfire. "I'll help," Felix said finally. "But we need proof that will stand up to GPA scrutiny. Evidence that can't be dismissed as criminal propaganda." Valeth's lipless mouth curved slightly. "That's why we need you, Felix. As a human, you can get closer to Vane than any of our operatives. And as a neutral party with a reputation for integrity, your testimony will carry weight." "I'm not an assassin," Felix clarified. "If that's what you're asking." "Nothing so crude," Kyrian said. "We need you to extract information, the location of his secure server that contains records of his operations. Once we have that, we can expose him to the GPA leadership and his own people." "And how exactly am I supposed to get close enough to extract this information?" Felix asked. The two matriarchs exchanged glances, a rare moment of perfect understanding between lifelong rivals. "By accepting his inevitable offer to betray us," Valeth said. "Vane will approach you. He'll try to recruit you as his asset, his inside man. And when he does," Kyrian continued, "you'll appear to accept, gain his trust, access his systems." Felix frowned. A dangerous game. If he suspects a double cross, then you'll die, Kyrian said bluntly. As will many others when his plan succeeds. Felix looked out at the stars, visible through the viewport. He had come to this sector to prevent bloodshed, not to engage in espionage against a powerful government official. But sometimes, he reflected, peace required action rather than neutrality. I'll need resources, he said finally, and a contingency plan if things go wrong. Valeth nodded. You shall have both. We've already begun preparations. And so began the most dangerous operation of Felix's career. For the next 72 hours, he worked closely with the combined intelligence teams of both syndicates. They created a false trail of communications, suggesting growing distrust between Felix and the matriarchs. They developed secure channels, recognition codes, and emergency extraction protocols. Most importantly, they equipped Felix with cutting-edge technology, subdermal implants that could bypass most security scans, neural interfaces that allowed him to process data at accelerated rates, and a quantum entanglement communicator no larger than a tooth that would allow secure communication regardless of distance or shielding. Remember, Lyra told him during the final briefing, Vane is not just a bureaucrat. He was special operations before joining the GPA. He has killed with his own hands and will recognize a fellow predator. So I shouldn't try to deceive him about what I am, Felix concluded. Exactly, Kyrian agreed. Be the mercenary he expects, pragmatic, somewhat immoral, motivated by self-preservation and profit. Just let him believe his offer exceeds ours. As predicted, Arcturus Vane arrived at Nexus Prime with considerable fanfare. His ship, the GPA diplomatic vessel Concordia, docked with ceremonial honors. Station administration rolled out the proverbial red carpet, and news feeds throughout the sector broadcast his arrival speech about bringing lasting peace to troubled regions. Felix watched the broadcast from his quarters, studying the man who had orchestrated so much chaos from the shadows. Vane's charisma was evident even through the screen, a commanding presence combined with a voice that projected both authority and compassion, a perfect mask for ambition and ruthlessness. The expected contact came 6 hours after Vane's arrival, delivered by a nondescript station maintenance worker, an invitation to a private meeting in the diplomatic suite. Felix went unarmed. Weapons would be detected and would only confirm any suspicions Vane might harbor. His only protection was his training, his augmentations, and the knowledge that both syndicate matriarchs had operatives strategically positioned throughout the station. The diplomatic suite occupied an entire section of Nexus Prime's administrative ring. Unlike the opulent chambers of the matriarchs, Vane's temporary headquarters projected austere efficiency, minimalist furnishings, subdued lighting, and the GPA emblem prominently displayed on every wall. Arcturus Vane himself was taller in person than he appeared in broadcasts, with the physical presence of someone who had seen combat. He greeted Felix with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Felix of Earth, Vane said, gesturing to a chair. Your reputation precedes you. As does yours, Deputy Secretary, Felix replied, taking the offered seat. Please, call me Arcturus. Vane poured 2 glasses of what appeared to be actual Earth whiskey, an astronomical expense this far from the Sol system. I understand you've been attempting to mediate between our local criminal enterprises. Felix accepted the glass but didn't drink. That was my assignment, yes. An assignment that has grown considerably more complicated. I imagine. Vane's green eyes studied Felix with predatory intensity. Especially now that both matriarchs seemed to be cooperating rather than conflicting. Felix kept his expression neutral. You're well informed. Vane smiled. The GPA maintains extensive intelligence networks, particularly in regions with significant criminal activity. He sipped his whiskey. Tell me, what have those 2 formidable ladies told you about me? A direct approach. Interesting. Felix decided to match it. That you manufactured evidence to pit them against each other. That you're building your own criminal network using GPA resources. That you orchestrated this entire conflict for personal gain. Vane didn't flinch. Instead, he chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. Fascinating narrative. And do you believe these accusations from known criminal overlords? I believe in evidence, Felix replied. And patterns. The data sets they provided contained identical quantum signatures. Someone skilled enough to infiltrate both organization systems, with resources beyond typical criminal means. An analytical mind. Good. Vane set down his glass. Then analyze this. The Shadowbane Syndicate and Void Star Cartel collectively control nearly 60% of illegal trade in this sector. They traffic in prohibited technologies, weapons, narcotics, and sentient beings. They corrupt officials, assassinate opponents, and operate with impunity in systems where GPA presence is limited. And you want to change that, Felix said. I want to bring order, Vane corrected. Not the chaotic feudalism of competing criminal fiefdoms, but structured, controlled operations that minimize violence and maximize profit. With yourself at the top? Vane spread his hands. Someone must be better a disciplined administrator than alien crime lords with centuries-old vendettas and territorial instincts. Felix leaned forward slightly. And the manufactured evidence? The deaths you've caused to advance this order? Necessary sacrifices for long-term stability, Vane said without a trace of remorse. This sector has been plagued by syndicate violence for generations. My approach will reduce bloodshed in the long run. Noble justification, Felix commented. Pragmatic assessment, Vane countered. Which brings me to you, Felix of Earth, a fellow pragmatist. I suspect. He refilled his glass. You're in a precarious position. Both matriarchs are using you as a pawn in their game against me. When that game ends, regardless of who wins, what happens to the pawn? The question hung in the air between them. Felix had to admit Vane's psychological tactics were effective. Plant seeds of doubt, offer a lifeline, appeal to self-interest. You have an alternative to suggest, Felix said, not phrasing it as a question. Vane smiled. Direct, I appreciate that. He activated a holographic display showing financial data. My organization offers you triple whatever the syndicates are paying, plus a permanent position as security consultant with diplomatic immunity. In return, you provide me with information on their operations, their vulnerabilities, and most importantly, their current location. You want me to betray them? I want you to choose the winning side, Vane corrected. My forces are already in position. Within 24 hours, GPA peacekeepers will raid major syndicate facilities throughout the sector. The only question is whether you'll be treated as an enemy combatant or a valuable ally. Felix pretended to consider the offer, while his augmented senses searched for any information about Vane's secure server. There, a subtle neural spike when Vane mentioned his forces being in position. He was connected to a command system, likely through an implant similar to Felix's own. It's an attractive offer, Felix said carefully. But trust works both ways. How do I know this isn't just eliminating witnesses after I've served my purpose? Vane's smile widened. Cynical, but fair. He touched his temple, and a secure data packet transferred to Felix's neural interface. These are operational plans for the first phase, troop deployments, target priorities, extraction protocols. Not the kind of information I'd share with someone I plan to eliminate. Felix reviewed the data without changing his expression. It was genuine, or at least, genuinely what Vane believed was happening. The operation was massive, involving multiple GPA Special Forces units, operating under classified directives. Impressive resources, Felix commented. The GPA Council approved all this? A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed Vane's face. The Council provides general authorization for peacekeeping operations. Tactical decisions remain at my discretion. Unsanctioned, then, Vane was operating at least partially outside official channels. That could be leveraged. I need time to consider, Felix said, and to extract myself from my current arrangements without raising suspicions. Vane nodded. Understandable. You have 12 hours. After that, events will be beyond my control. He handed Felix a secure communicator. Contact me when you've decided. But remember, Felix, I'm not the only one who knows about your meetings with me. If the matriarchs suspect you're considering my offer, your life expectancy drops considerably. Felix took the communicator and stood. I understand the stakes. As he left the diplomatic suite, Felix maintained a casual pace, giving no indication of the urgency he felt. His neural implants had captured valuable data during the meeting, but not the server location he needed. For that, he would need deeper access to Vane's systems. Back in his quarters, Felix activated the quantum communicator embedded in his molar. Contact established. Initial meeting complete. Lyra's voice responded directly into his auditory nerve. Assessment. Vane confirmed his operation. He's using GPA resources without full council authorization. Raid planned within 24 hours. Location of the server? Not obtained. I'll need to get closer. He's given me 12 hours to consider his offer. A pause. Matriarch Valeth says proceed to Phase 2. Extraction team on standby. Phase 2 was considerably more dangerous. Rather than waiting for Vane to contact him again, Felix would infiltrate the diplomatic vessel itself, the Concordia. Intelligence suggested Vane's secure server was physically located aboard, isolated from station networks. The infiltration plan relied on a combination of syndicate resources. Voidstar provided falsified authorization codes and digital camouflage that would mask Felix's presence from standard security systems. Shadowbane contributed more direct assistance, a diversionary attack on a secondary GPA facility that would draw security personnel away from the Concordia. 6 hours after his meeting with Vane, Felix moved through the maintenance corridors of Nexus Prime, wearing the uniform of a station technician. His neural implants processed real-time security data, identifying patrol patterns and surveillance blind spots. The diversion came right on schedule. A series of explosions at a GPA storage facility 3 levels below the diplomatic docking ring. Alarms blared, and security personnel rushed to respond. Felix used the confusion to approach the restricted access point connecting to the Concordia's docking tube. His falsified credentials passed the initial scan. He stepped into the narrow tube connecting station to ship, aware that he was crossing not just a physical threshold, but a legal one as well. If caught aboard a GPA diplomatic vessel without authorization, not even his status as a neutral mediator would protect him. The Concordia's internal security was more sophisticated than expected. Felix had to move carefully, using service ducts and maintenance shafts to avoid patrols. His target was the ship's secure communications center, the most likely location for Vane's private server. He was halfway there when the ship's alarms activated. Not for him. There was no sign his presence had been detected, but for something else. Through a viewport, he saw GPA security vessels detaching from Nexus Prime, engines flaring as they accelerated toward a distant point of light. The raid had begun early. Vane had lied about the timeline. Felix redoubled his pace, discarding caution for speed. The communications center was locked down, but his Voidstar infiltration tools made short work of the security systems. Inside, banks of servers hummed, processing data from across the sector. His neural implants scanned for the specific quantum signature he'd detected in the falsified evidence. There, a standalone unit with its own power supply and security envelope. Felix bypassed the protective measures and initiated a direct neural interface connection. Data flooded his augmented consciousness. Operational plans, communication logs, financial transfers. evidence of years of manipulation, corruption, and calculated violence. Vane hadn't just been building a criminal empire. He'd been systematically dismantling every power structure in the sector that wasn't under his direct control. Most damning were the casualty projections for the current operation. Vane expected, even planned for massive civilian casualties as acceptable collateral damage in his strikes against syndicate facilities. Felix downloaded everything, his neural storage compressing and encrypting the data for transmission. Just as he prepared to disconnect, the communication center's door slid open. "I'm disappointed, Felix," Arcturus Vane said, leveling a neural disruptor at him. Though not surprised. Felix slowly raised his hands. "You moved up the timeline." "A precaution," Vane replied, stepping into the room. "One of many, including monitoring your neural activity during our meeting. You're augmented beyond standard mercenary levels. Syndicate technology, I presume." "Just being prepared," Felix said, buying time as his implants completed the data transfer to the quantum communicator. "Indeed." Vane's expression hardened. "The data you've accessed is classified under GPA Security Directive 15C. The penalty for unauthorized access is immediate execution. Without trial? That doesn't sound like GPA procedure." Vane's smile was cold. "Out here, I am GPA procedure." He adjusted the settings on his disruptor. "Any last words, Deathworlder?" "Just one question," Felix replied. "Did you really think the matriarchs wouldn't have a contingency plan?" Confusion flickered across Vane's face, quickly replaced by realization as the ship shuddered violently. The lights flickered, and emergency klaxons began to wail. "What have you done?" Vane demanded, momentarily distracted. It was all the opening Felix needed. He lunged forward, knocking the disruptor aside as it discharged. The neural scrambling energy bolt missed him by centimeters, impacting a server bank that exploded in a shower of sparks. Vane was fast, faster than a normal human should be, augmented, like Felix. They grappled in the confined space, each landing blows that would have incapacitated an ordinary opponent. Felix's Deathworld physiology gave him an edge in raw strength. But Vane's augmentations and combat experience made him a lethal adversary. "The syndicates are finished," Vane hissed as they struggled. "My forces are already moving against their major facilities." "Check your tactical feed," Felix grunted, blocking a strike aimed at his throat. "Your operation is compromised." Another violent shudder ran through the ship. The artificial gravity fluctuated, sending both men momentarily floating before slamming them back to the deck. Vane's eyes widened as he accessed his neural feed. "Impossible! My security!" "Was good," Felix acknowledged, driving a knee into Vane's solar plexus. "But not good enough." While Felix had been infiltrating the Concordia, the combined hacking teams of Shadowbane and Voidstar had been using the data from his neural scans to penetrate Vane's command network. They'd identified his strike forces and transmitted false orders, sending them to abandoned locations or into prepared ambushes. Simultaneously, they'd released the evidence of Vane's corruption to both GPA leadership and Galactic media outlets. His carefully constructed operation was unraveling in real time. Vane fought with the desperation of a man watching his life's work collapse. He managed to reach a hidden weapon, a monomolecular blade that sliced through Felix's body armor like it was fabric. Pain lanced through Felix's side as the blade found flesh. But pain was an old companion for a Deathworlder. Felix used Vane's forward momentum against him, executing a grappling maneuver that slammed the GPA official into a control panel with bone-crushing force. Vane crumpled, momentarily stunned. Felix didn't waste the advantage. He secured Vane's hands with restraints, then applied a medical sealant to his own wound. "It's over, Arcturus," he said, breathing heavily. "Your evidence is public. The GPA Council has issued an emergency directive rescinding your authority." Vane glared up at him, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "You've doomed this sector to chaos. The syndicates will tear each other apart eventually. It's their nature." "Maybe," Felix acknowledged. "But they'll do it on their terms, not yours. And with considerably fewer civilian casualties." The extraction team, a mixed unit of Shadowbane and Void Star operatives, arrived minutes later. They secured Vane and recovered the physical server for additional evidence. As they prepared to leave the compromised vessel, Nexus Prime's administrator, Quillen, contacted them via secure channel. The tall, insectoid alien's mandibles clicked with agitation as he spoke. "The station is in lockdown. GPA reinforcements are en route. I cannot guarantee safe passage for known criminal elements." "We understand, Administrator," Felix replied, "but perhaps we can offer a mutually beneficial arrangement." Nexus Prime had always survived by balancing competing interests. With Vane's corrupt operation exposed, a new balance would need to be established, one that acknowledged the reality of syndicate influence while protecting civilian populations. The negotiations were tense but productive. In exchange for safe departure, the syndicates agreed to formalize their truce, establish clear operational boundaries, and most importantly, contribute to a station security fund that would enhance protections for non-combatants. 3 days later, representatives from across the sector gathered in Nexus Prime's central chamber. Matriarch Kyrian and Matriarch Valeth, traditional enemies now united by shared adversity, signed the historic Nexus Accord, a non-aggression pact that would reshape criminal operations throughout the sector. Arcturus Vane, stripped of his authority and facing multiple charges before the GPA Council, was transferred to a maximum security facility to await trial. His network of corrupt officials and operatives was being systematically dismantled, though Felix suspected some would escape justice. As the ceremony concluded, Felix found himself on an observation deck, gazing out at the stars. His wound was healing. Deathworlders recovered quickly, but the experience had left other marks. "Contemplating your next assignment?" Lyra asked, approaching quietly. Felix smiled slightly. "Actually, I was considering a change of career. Mediation seems to suit me, despite the occupational hazards." "The matriarchs would be pleased to hear that," the Novarian said. "They've authorized me to offer you a permanent position, triple your usual rate, plus accommodations on Nexus Prime." "As what exactly? Their shared enforcer?" Lyra's expression remained neutral, but her eyes blinked in what Felix had come to recognize as amusement. "As an independent arbiter, the Nexus Accord requires neutral oversight to resolve disputes between signatories. Someone with proven integrity, combat capabilities, and the rare ability to understand diverse perspectives." Felix considered the offer. He had come to this sector expecting a straightforward peacekeeping mission. Instead, he'd found himself caught between alien crime queens and galactic conspiracies, navigating layers of deception and violence to uncover truth. Yet, in that chaos, something unexpected had emerged, a fragile peace built not on domination, but on mutual respect and shared interests. It wouldn't last forever. The nature of power meant eventual conflict. But perhaps, with the right guidance, that conflict could be managed, channeled into less destructive forms. "I'll need guarantees of independence," Felix said, "and authority to make binding decisions." "Already included in the contract," Lyra assured him. "The matriarchs understand the value of genuine neutrality." Behind them, Nexus Prime hummed with renewed activity. The station that had nearly become a battleground was transforming into something else, a true nexus, where competing interests could find common ground. "Tell the matriarchs I accept," Felix said finally. "But with one condition: transparency. No more shadow games." Lyra nodded. "I will convey your terms." As she departed, Felix returned his gaze to the stars. Beyond the viewport, the galaxy stretched endlessly, filled with conflicts and alliances, predators and prey, chaos and order in constant flux. The peace he had helped forge was just one small point of stability in that vast uncertainty. But it was a start. In the weeks that followed, Felix established his office in a neutral section of Nexus Prime. Representatives from both syndicates, and increasingly, from independent operators throughout the sector, brought disputes for his arbitration. His reputation for fair judgment, combined with the very real threat of his Deathworlder capabilities, ensured his rulings were respected. Matriarch Kyrian and Matriarch Valeth maintained their uneasy alliance, though Felix frequently had to intervene when territorial disputes threatened to escalate. The two powerful alien leaders had centuries of rivalry to overcome, but their shared experience fighting Vayne had created a foundation for cooperation. "You've become quite the diplomat," Kyrian observed during one particularly tense negotiation over shipping rights. Her fiery scales had dimmed to a thoughtful amber. "For a species known primarily for violence, humans contain multitudes," Felix replied, "just like Signans and Novarians." The true test of the Nexus Accord came when data recovered from Vayne's server revealed connections to another, larger conspiracy. Encrypted communications pointed to a shadowy organization with operatives embedded throughout the Galactic Peace Assembly. Individuals who shared Vayne's vision of centralized control disguised as peacekeeping. "This goes beyond our sector," Valeth said during an emergency council meeting. Her 6 eyes blinked in rapid sequence, a sign of serious concern. "If these connections are genuine, the entire galactic power structure may be compromised. Syndicate operations will be targeted throughout known space," Kyrian added, "not just by corrupt officials, but by those manipulating them from the shadows." Felix studied the evidence they had compiled: patterns of communication, resource allocation, strategic positioning, all suggesting a coordinated effort to destabilize independent powers, both legitimate and criminal, throughout the galaxy. "We need more information," he said finally, "and allies beyond this sector." "You propose expanding our arrangement?" Valeth asked carefully. Felix nodded. "A network of independent arbiters, neutral parties who can verify information, mediate disputes, and identify manipulation attempts like Vayne's." "A tall order," Kyrian commented, her crest flaring slightly. "Few possess your unique combination of skills." "There are others," Felix assured her. "Deathworlders and non-Deathworlders alike who value genuine independence over forced conformity." The proposal was controversial. Many syndicate lieutenants saw it as surrendering autonomy. Some station officials worried it would legitimize criminal enterprises. But as reports of suspicious GPA activities in neighboring sectors increased, resistance to the idea diminished. One evening, as Felix worked late in his office, analyzing data on recent shipping disruptions, Administrator Quillen requested a private meeting. "Your efforts have not gone unnoticed," the insectoid official said, mandibles clicking softly. "Nexus Prime has experienced a 43% decrease in violent incidents since the Accord was implemented." "A good start," Felix acknowledged, "but fragile." Quillen's compound eyes seemed to study him with unusual intensity. "There are whispers among station administrators across multiple sectors. Patterns of interference similar to what occurred here." "Vayne's associates?" "Perhaps." Quillen extended a data crystal. "This contains communication logs from official GPA channels. They suggest coordinated action against independent stations and settlements, ostensibly anti-criminal operations, but with parameters that would inevitably impact civilian governance." Felix accepted the crystal. "Why bring this to me?" "Because Nexus Prime remains independent precisely because you helped establish a functioning balance of power." Quillen's mandibles trembled slightly. "Many of us wish our stations to remain similarly autonomous." The implications were clear. The network Felix had proposed wouldn't just serve syndicate interests. It would protect the complex ecosystem of independent spaces that existed in the margins of galactic society. Places where diverse species coexisted according to their own rules, rather than centralized authority. "I'll analyze this information," Felix promised, "and take appropriate action." After Quillen departed, Felix stood at his viewport, watching ships arrive and depart from Nexus Prime. Each vessel carried its own stories, its own purposes: legitimate traders, syndicate operators, refugees, explorers, all navigating the same space according to different maps. His neural implants processed the new data, finding correlations with what they'd recovered from Vane's server. The pattern was unmistakable: a systematic effort to eliminate independence and establish controlled channels for all galactic activity. Felix activated his quantum communicator. "Lyra, I need to speak with both matriarchs, immediately." "They are currently in separate meetings," the Novarian security chief replied. "Is this an emergency?" Felix looked at the data scrolling through his neural feed. Calculated disruptions, engineered conflicts, manipulated evidence. The same tactics Vane had employed, but on a galactic scale. "Yes," he said, "I believe it is." As he waited for the matriarchs to respond, Felix reflected on how far he had come from his original mission. He had arrived on Nexus Prime as a simple mediator, expected to negotiate a truce between competing criminal enterprises. Now, he stood at the center of a growing network of independent powers, united against a hidden threat to galactic autonomy. The Deathworlder, who had once sold his combat skills to the highest bidder, had found a different purpose: protecting the chaotic, vibrant diversity of a galaxy that thrived on difference rather than conformity. Outside his viewport, the endless stars beckoned. Among them, countless worlds and stations and vessels continued their journeys, unaware of the forces moving to control them. Felix's hand rested on the data crystal, containing evidence of the larger conspiracy. The boundary between peacekeeper and revolutionary was thinner than he had ever imagined, as was the line between criminal and freedom fighter. In the vast complexity of galactic politics, sometimes the only path to genuine peace lay through the territories most would label chaos. Felix smiled grimly. If chaos was what awaited, he was ready. After all, Deathworlders thrived in impossible situations. The communicator chimed, indicating the matriarchs were ready for his briefing. Felix took a deep breath and prepared to guide them into the next phase of their unlikely alliance, one that might reshape the galaxy itself. The future remained uncertain, balanced precariously between order and chaos, between central control and independent autonomy. But in that uncertainty lay possibility. And possibility was worth fighting for.